Welcome back. I'm Warren Powell. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer of Optimal Dynamics and Professor Emeritus at Princeton and Executive in Residence at Rutgers. This is the Academic Roadmap to Supply Chain Excellence, Part 4, the Universal Problem-Solving Process. So what I'm going to do is I've identified 6 steps in attacking what I've come to call sequential decision problems, but this is pretty much any hard problem that arises in business science or engineering. It's got these 6 steps. Steps 2, 3, 4, and 5 are technical. These involve mathematical modeling, programming, software. Step 1 and step 6 are 2 steps that I believe are very appropriate for a business school community where this will not involve either mathematics or programming, but it will involve building a bridge between an actual application and what's needed to build the mathematical model, even if we're never going to build one. Now, this is all part of what I've come to call the skill cycle. This all starts with a business problem with business people with no particular training other than their own application. And what I think we should do is have a step where we go to a group of business students appropriately trained who are trained in what I call analytical thinking. This is not mathematics, but this is the bridge to the third step, which is mathematical modeling. It's my universal modeling framework. And what happened is to build out the universal modeling framework, you need the answers to certain questions. And what we need are people who, for complex problems such as a supply chain, we need people who have the ability to go into that setting and ask these questions. Now, sometimes we just need the answers to those questions. The approach to making the right decisions does not require sophisticated computer modeling. Maybe it does require a spreadsheet. So when we end up with computer science, maybe that's just a spreadsheet, and eventually we have to bring it back to the implementation. So I'm going to start off with this. In step 1, we have my question that I really like. It's if you want to run a better supply chain or energy system or health system, you have to make better decisions. This all starts with 3 questions. What are the performance metrics? What decisions do you have to make and who makes them? What are the sources of uncertainty? I can't build a model without the answers to those 3 questions. So this is what I'm going to call well-informed, asking the right questions. And I think this helps structure problems, even if you're not going to then end up building a complicated computer modeling, although usually you're going to end up on a spreadsheet, which is a computer model. Now, let's start with performance metrics. People love to list KPIs for businesses, and they have these long lists of KPIs. As if somehow if you create a KPI, that metric instantly starts getting better. Now, I really enjoy the work of Laura Cesare. She's a very popular influencer on LinkedIn, about 330 followers. Now, she's a big fan of streamlining down. She's got 2 metrics that she particularly enjoys, inventory turns and operating margin. So inventory turns is a measure. This is your sales divided by the value of inventory. So the less inventory you have, the higher the turns. So generally higher turns is considered better. Higher operating margin is considered better. Now the reason why people are not always in the upper right-hand corner is because you've got the economy, you've got economic factors, you've got environmental factors, you have the competition. You have technology change. And she likes these graphs where she plots these 2 points over time because this captures how well a company or an industry, here's an individual company, Ecolab, and she's comparing it to the chemical industry and showing how Ecolab's variations on these metrics compared to what's been happening in the chemical industry. Now, of course, the chemical industry is an amalgam of many different types of chemicals. But this is a way of understanding the resilience of a company. Sometimes the market will come in and push them way out, and then you have to see, well, how quickly does a company rebound, say from an event like the COVID pandemic. Now, I like to organize metrics as if I'm anywhere in the company. So if you're at, say, the C-suite level and you want to maximize stock price, so you put stock price at the top. I like pyramids because we all recognize there's going to be a lot of metrics. There's going to be more than just one metric or two metrics, but you should prioritize them and put one metric at the very top and say, okay, that's the main one that I'm going to focus on, but then have the other metrics in various labels. Now, which metrics depend on where you are within the company. So stock price may be, hey, sure, I want to maximize the stock price, but if I'm down in, say, a manufacturing component, I may be focused on unit cost, and I may have a different set of metrics. In fact, especially for students starting out, you might be way down there at some lower part of a company. And so companies have all kinds of little niches, and you're going to have your own metrics for wherever you're working at within the company. So what you should do is when you go into a company, look around you and say, okay, what are the metrics, the most impact your particular operation, the stuff that your immediate boss is particularly interested in. Now, if you want to do better metrics, you need to make better decisions. So this starts off with identifying the decisions. You have to talk about who makes the decisions, what are the timelines, is it strategic, tactical, or real-time decisions? What do the decisions do? It's not always physical stuff. You're not always scheduling products and facilities and machines. You might have financial decisions and information decisions. So, to go do a study and collect information. Here's a little exercise I did. I visited Amazon. They ran a workshop for academics, and then we got to have a little tour of one of the fulfillment centers. And I found myself, as I walked around the fulfillment center, looking for decisions. And I think this is a great exercise that students should start learning how to do, and schools should start teaching students, which is, have a little decision book. So this is a little book you can get from Amazon. Sort of ironic. And then you write down, okay, what are the metrics? And you might have just a very small number of metrics. One of the hardest things to identify is decisions. What decisions are being made? When was a decision made? These are not generally always obvious.
Now that you've had a drink, oh, what a time to think. Wow, I could have had a V8.
So I could have had a V8 commercial started in the 1970s. Brilliant marketing line, because what they found was they had what they thought was this great product, and everybody's out there still drinking their soda or whatever, or maybe tomato juice. And what the company decided is that they needed to make people aware that, when you pick up that soda or the tomato juice, you could have had a V8. And so it was creating that awareness that when you do that, that's a decision, and you could have made a different decision. I think this is one of the greatest skills that everybody should learn when they're in industry. Now, the third question is sources of uncertainty. Now, you say uncertainty in supply chains, and everybody's going to jump up and go, oh my gosh, yes, risk. I know all about risk or resilience or whatnot. We almost equate risk and uncertainty. Risk is a very big deal in supply chains. This tends to focus on a very small subset of big risk issues that have a major impact on the company. In my book, I have identified 12 classes of uncertainty that have nothing to do with supply chain management or any application. They have everything to do with models. Where can uncertainty enter the universal modeling framework? And so these are technical terms, and students would have to learn. And the idea is when you have a particular application, you're not going to fill in uncertainties for all 12 classes, although you might. Because if you sit down to a major supply chain problem, you're going to have all 12 classes. But you may only have a much smaller, like if I'm optimizing a game of chess, I just have the uncertainty of my opponent. You have to sort of go through and say, hey, what are the uncertainties that I think are relevant to whatever problem I'm solving? And you have to translate that into the language of your problem domain, not just the problem domain of supply chain management, because that's a big umbrella, but the context of whatever problem that you are working on. And I think this is a teachable skill. Now, source of uncertainty, uncertainty quantification and stochastic modeling. This uncertainty comes in all kinds of flavors, hourly variations, bursts and spikes. So this came from my visit out to Amazon. So they revealed something to us. They said, okay, for their fulfillment centers, 98% of the items in a fulfillment center on any given day have a demand of zero. And of course, you have your high volume items, but most of the stuff, it just sits there and it's just a demand of zero. And you're thinking, wow, demand of zero. That means, the orders must come in 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. And they said, no, that's not true either. What'll happen is you're sitting there and there's just no demand, no demand, no demand, and then you sell one. So what happens is somebody gets it and they tell two friends and they buy it and they tell two friends and they buy it, and then you get this little burst that grows up and then dies out and goes back to zero again. So that's a killer, because it means that you can't just have an inventory of one, because once those other orders start coming in, you don't have time to get the product from India or China. You're going to have to be holding inventory to handle those bursts. Now, there's different types of uncertainties, like when I shift into a whole different sales level. Here's a good one. Bud Light, poor Bud Light. They're cranking along as the industry leader, having a good time. And some marketing wizard decides, hey, let's do a whole marketing campaign for the LGBTQ community. And they go out and all the best intentions, and Bud Light has a bunch of people who didn't approve of that particular marketing campaign, and they lost 25% of their business. Whoa. Imagine what that does to a supply chain. Now, probably the marketing people didn't even tell the operations people that this was happening, and even if they did, who would have thunk? It's like, okay, probably nobody anticipated that there would be this incredible drop, a 25% drop. You have a 25% drop in the total demand for your product, absolutely eviscerates your supply chain. Okay, let's jump all the way to step 6. So once we get the answers to those 3 questions, now we have to sit down and say, okay, how hard is my decision problem? I might just have, hey, here's 7 choices. What's the best of 7? I'll put it in a spreadsheet and I'm done. There's your mathematical model. Once you put it in the spreadsheet and you want to pick the best of 7, now you go back to my sectional and optimal learning. Okay, uncertainty modeling is almost never trivial. One way to handle uncertainty in a very good way is to use history. The more you can depend on history, history will have all the ugly stuff captured, but it's not a panacea. Let's get to step 6. Now you've got yourself, you've got your problem, you've identified your decisions, you worked your way through, and you've said, okay, this is the best decision. Now you have the problem of making the decision. How do you get the decision so you actually impact the real world? So at Optimal Dynamics, we found this is a big deal, okay? And I don't think we were the first to discover this. So we teamed up with a specialty firm, Metaphora. There's a white paper that you can download from the Optimal Dynamics website that has discussions on the whole issue of change management. And once again, this is where a business school team that understands the problem and understands the decisions can also and should also be thinking about the implementation side. I've talked to experts who talk about new ways of doing forecasting, and they're very frustrated because it says, yes, this is a great way of doing forecasting, but they have a hard time getting people to actually implement it and follow the forecasts. Okay, so I want to close my whole talk with a new style of teaching. We have a history of teaching decision analytics, and we want to teach decisions under uncertainty. The available books for this are mathematically advanced. They emphasize complex methods that work on a narrow set of problems. It's really unfortunate. I lived in this community for most of my life. I contributed to this community, and the simple problem is that it's a lot of academic fodder. Now, I've written 3 books. The first one, Reinforcement Learning and Stochastic Optimization. It's a single book, 1,100 pages, aimed at a technical audience. This is for people who want to build models. So these are people with the mathematical skills. It's not advanced math, but it's engineering math. And so, and I would really limit this to either PhDs or people with masters in analytically sophisticated fields. The second book, Sequential Decision Analytics and Modeling, you can download that from the internet. So far, I've got 14,000 downloads. It's a teach by example book. So with the exception of chapters 1 and 7, every chapter is just a different example showing you how to take a problem and model it using the universal framework. But it's very analytics oriented. The last one is actually aimed at professors teaching optimization. So let me skip that. This is the book that we need for business students, and it hasn't been written. It needs to be written. We desperately need a case studies book where we take case studies and then address the three questions. So no mathematical modeling. We just want to take this business problem and say, what are the metrics? What are the decisions? What are the uncertainties? Okay, so I think that there's opportunities for changing the teaching style. Right now, from part one of this talk, we have a lot of books where students are taught analytics with very narrow problem settings, inventory policy, warehousing, plant layout type of thing. It's all very specialized. I've seen what supply chain management students are doing, and they're doing a wide range of things. Once they get inside a company, the company doesn't say, hey, what did you learn how to do? They say, here's my business problem. How can you help me with my business problems? And so supply chain management students should learn how to describe problems in terms that an analytical team can understand, or at a minimum in terms that can translate to a spreadsheet. The students are learning simple analytical tools for stylized problems. And the reason we write those books in that way is so the math is easier to teach and can be implemented in a spreadsheet. The problem is we need students to, but then there's the problem of how to generalize that and apply it to real problems. Students need to work from a general modeling framework that applies to all problem settings. Now, if they happen to be working an inventory problem, and supply chain students, I guess they occasionally do work on inventory problems, but they work on any one of a host of other problems. But they need to be taught how to think about the problems. Now, sometimes they may say, oh, here's an inventory problem. Here's a good policy for solving that. Students are introduced to tools like linear programming, and that's great. It's first of all, it's a static tool, and we need to teach students that sometimes these linear programs are implemented in a sequential way. And that doesn't mean that you have to do something incredibly complicated. Most of the time, what's going to happen is you're going to take your linear program and say, okay, given uncertainty, what could go wrong with this the decision? How can I make it work better? And usually people come up with ways to put in tunable parameters to make it work better. Nobody's really that interested in optimal. They just want it to work well, work better than what's out there. My last pet peeve is case studies. So I think it was back in the 1960s that Harvard Business School introduced their style of Harvard Business School case studies. For 2 years at Princeton, I taught a course. I was given a course that was a Harvard Business School case studies course. And I taught case studies for 2 years. Wow, I didn't like it. The cases are all very specialized. You go in, there's the case, okay, here's the problem, you discuss it, you solve the problem, and it's just like the analytics. Are you ever going to face exactly that problem before? Are you actually learning something solving one problem that helps you solve a different problem? And the answer is, I don't know. I'm not so sure. Now let's tweak it. Let's take cases, any Harvard Business School case. I've got to assume that at the end of the day, you're trying to do something better. And my line is that if you want to do something better, you've got to make better decisions. So what I would do is take any business problem, any case situation, and introduce the exercise of saying, answer the three questions of metrics, decisions, and uncertainties. And I think it adds structure to a case where what you're learning is not how to solve the case, you're learning how to adapt the metrics, decisions, and uncertainties to a wide range of business problems. And so if you do this, in a course with about 10 or 12 different cases, well, if you're constantly applying the same, hey, here's the structure, metrics, decisions, and uncertainties, and you do 10 or 12 different cases, I think you probably have a good shot at, now that you're seeing a problem that's completely different, they're still going to have metrics, they're still going to have decisions, they're still going to have uncertainties. I think it's a new way. Maybe we call it the Rutgers Business School method, and everybody may start saying, hey, what's going on at Rutgers? That's what I call leadership. And of course, I would love to see Rutgers come out with the website with the subtitle that we are the decision department. So thank you very much. I hope everybody's enjoyed the 4-part series. And if you want more background material, this is more based on the analytics. Hopefully we'll make some progress of building out the case studies. But for people who are interested in the modeling side, tinyurl.com/SDA links will have a lot of educational material.